The night at Cedar Oaks. Darrell Jenkins pulled up along the curve in front of the Cedar Oaks Retirement Center. The former nursing home sat on the edge of the small farm town, a hollow shell of what it once was. It had been almost a year since the place closed down, but every time Darrell drove past it, he thought he saw swirling shadows of the residents standing in the windows, looking out amongst the landscape of undulating crops and soybeans. He could still see his grandfather sitting out in one of the pale yellow rocking chairs, smiling a toothless smile that seemed to be stitched on his face, and wearing the same faded overalls he had always worn back in his farming days. Even when he was in his 80s, he always had a tin can of chew stuck in his shirt pocket. Before they had buried him, Darrell had laid the tin can with him in the coffin. Old habits never die, his grandfather had said. Darrell believed that he was still living in the nursing home, and would sit in the rocking chair and make it squeak like he always did. It was this building that gave him the idea for his next YouTube episode. The abandoned nursing home was the perfect candidate for his ongoing ghost hunting series entitled Driving the Spirits of Our Past. He and his partner Andy had started the series 6 months ago, putting out 20 episodes so far. They had remained pretty popular, not only in Iowa but from the surrounding states too. Darrell will admit that they haven't seen an actual apparition. "How long did the mayor say we could stay at the nursing home?" Andy asked, placing his video camera tripod into the truck. "Only 72 hours, he told him. Darrell went past the 4 pale yellow rocking chairs, and the memory of his grandfather shot through his brain. Standing next to the chairs, he felt like his grandfather was still sitting there, watching them unload with a gummy grin on his face and chew between his bottom lip and teeth. Darrell took in a deep breath and pushed the key into the hole. The wooden door opened with a loud creak. A heavy, musty odor flew at his nose. It was all dark except for the sunlight that shone through the large open windows. They found themselves in the front lobby area. The artificial plants were still placed by the windows and entrance where they had always been. Thick layers of dust had settled on their petals. Darrell could feel his nose fill up with the particles that were flying through the air. He anticipated sneezing within the next 5 minutes. There was a table and 4 chairs still placed on the right-hand side of the lobby. On the other side were 2 black leather armchairs and 1 couch. There was a small 2-shelf bookstand that was now bare. It, too, had a layer of dust on top. The floor spilled out to the front desk and then stopped when it hit the hallways where the residents' rooms used to be. Across from him was the hallway that went past business offices into the dining room. There was hardly any light that managed to make its way there, so the hallway appeared dark and desolate. Small chills ran down Darrell's spine. "Let's finish unloading," Darrell instructed. When they finished unloading, they started scouting the area for places to set up their video cameras. They placed their last camera in the lobby area. Suddenly they heard a loud bang coming from down the hallway toward the dining room. "What the hell was that?" Andy asked. "I don't know," Darrell replied, "but we need to get moving." They grabbed the EMF meter, spirit box, audio recorder, and portable video camera and headed down the hallway. Even though they were running on carpet, the sound of their footsteps seemed to bounce off the walls. Darrell pulled open the heavy wooden doors, and they both stepped into the solid gray of the room. He laid the EMF meter and audio recorder on one table and put the spirit box onto another table closer to the service window. "Is the camera ready?" Darrell asked. Andy nodded. "Yep, all set." "We just heard a loud bang coming from this direction," Darrell said to the camera. "We had literally just got done installing our video recorders in 4 main sections of the building. So far, we haven't heard anything else." He took a seat at the table where he sat his EMF meter and audio recorder. The chair made a loud squeak as he dragged it over the floor. The EMF meter was active, displaying normal static noises. "Are there any spirits here?" he asked aloud. They both listened carefully, but couldn't hear any distorted noises. Darrell looked around the room, hoping to spot any suspicious movements like dancing shadows or doors opening on their own. "Are there any spirits here?" he repeated. "We come in peace. We just want to talk." Both men perked up when they thought they heard thumping noises coming from the kitchen. Darrell looked at the camera. "Maybe we should go check it out, huh?" The kitchen smelled heavy of dish soap when Darrell stepped foot into it. There were no windows at all, so a heavy blackness covered everything. He held the EMF meter high over his head, walking past the sink. "Are there any friendly spirits in here?" They stayed in the kitchen for another 5 minutes before stepping back into the dining room. Darrell decided to cut the tape so he could do this introduction suit. He would stand out in front and do a quick introduction of himself and the new location they were hunting at. As they were walking back up the hallway toward the front lobby, they both heard some creaking noises coming from the other side of the building. This time, however, they kept moving forward and didn't detour. "We're here for another couple of days," he said. "There'll be plenty of times we'll investigate strange noises." "Hopefully, but probably misleading noises," Andy commented. They spent the rest of the day exploring the building. The residents' beds were stripped but had layers of dust and other particles on them. One room still had the remains of a fern on a nightstand. "I think we'll do them a favor and throw that away," Darrell said. Darrell went through one room near the very back of the building. It was one of the last 4 rooms. He knelt down and peeked under the bed, and he found a photo. The photo was of 2 older ladies sitting at the table. Both of the residents were looking into the camera. The woman on the far left was giving a big smile, showing all her teeth. The other woman was not smiling. She appeared agitated at the person taking the picture. Her lips were pressed tightly together. Her slanted blue eyes seemed to burn into his, sending shivers throughout his body. It was as if the woman was looking directly at him, and not at the camera. There were heavy bandages over her hands. Perhaps there was the reason behind her heavy frown. Shaking off the feeling, he placed the photo on the dresser and continued with the rest of the rooms. "Which room do you want?" Andy asked. "I was thinking of sleeping out in the lobby," he told him. "That's where I wanted to sleep," Andy exclaimed. "Well then, we'll be roomies." The next morning, they started their hunt right away, skipping breakfast till later. Darrell kept glancing at the cameras mounted in the corners. He was crushing his fingers that they were capturing something worthwhile. They checked the dining room again. They checked the kitchen again, and went from room to room, hoping they would capture any kind of noise, whether it be a voice or even a thump. They were rounding the corner where the far side of nurse's desk was. The home had 2 desks on either side of the building and 2 eye wash stations, which was where the nurses' aides would throw trash and linens away and wash out stained linens. Darrell was rounding the desk when Andy shouted, "Hey Darrell, over here!" Andy had the eye wash station propped open. "Was this here yesterday?" Darrell's eyes went wide when he saw a large dark trail of blood going down the wall. It looked like it had been there for some time, but Darrell could swear it wasn't there the day before. "Make sure you get it on tape," Darrell instructed. "Creeps me out, man," Andy confessed. "I know it wasn't here yesterday." Andy closed the eye wash station door and they headed back down the hallway. There was hardly any sunlight falling through the windows. The forecast was calling for rain so large, thick gray clouds had covered the sky. It made the hallways more desolate than usual. Darrell decided he wanted to try and capture some voices. They went into a room that happened to be the one they found the dead fern in. Darrell placed the EMF meter and an audio recorder on the dresser and the spirit box on the nightstand. They both sat on the bed and waited for the sound of anything other than static. "I just want to say hello," Darrell said aloud. "We come in peace. We just wanted to have a conversation with you, that's all." Just then the EMF meter picked up a noise that wasn't the usual static. Both men's faces turned toward the device. The noise sounded like a drunken, slurry grumble. Darrell's heart began to race and his limbs started tensing up. It was from both excitement and anxiousness. "Are you trying to tell us something?" he asked. "Do you want to talk to us?" There was only the static now. Darrell tried asking again, but the grumbling noise didn't come up. It didn't come up again until the 3rd time he tried to communicate. "What does that sound like to you?" he asked Andy. "Can't tell right off the bat," he said. "It almost sounds like it's asking a question, like it's concerned about something." I was getting that vibe too. They spent the next half hour trying to communicate, but the noise never showed up again. Disappointed, they left the room and decided to have some brunch. There was some hopefulness in Darrell's heart, though. They had found blood that hadn't been there the day before, and they had just recorded a strange noise. He was confident that they were slowly on their way to exposing a real, live ghost. It was later that night, and Andy had already gone to sleep. Darrell's eyelids were heavy, and he caught himself nodding off several times. However, he was sitting on the couch in the lobby, listening to his partner snore and trying to decipher the strange noise they had recorded. He felt he was getting close. He figured it was a 3-word question, and the middle word was "my." Where? Was that the first word? He played it over again. He tried his best to block out the snoring, but Andy had a deviated septum that desperately needed attention. After a while, he decided he could concentrate more effectively elsewhere. He grabbed the recorder and his flashlight and headed away from the lobby in search of a better retreat. Even Darrell had to admit to himself that the nursing home was giving him the creeps. The words he pledged were the creepier the better, but now he was secretly wishing he could just find a ghost and get out of there. He jerked his head to the right, shining his flashlight down the long east hallway. He thought he saw something move at the end of the hall. It was just his imagination playing tricks on him, he thought. But then he glanced at the hallway to his left, and he swore he saw 2 eyes peeking out from the doorway of one of his rooms. He took a deep breath and scolded himself. "You're coming close to capturing a live ghost," he said. "Now's not the time to chicken out." Darrell placed the recorder on the nurse's desk and started it up again. Now he distinctively heard the words, "Where's my..." The last word was tough, lower than the others. It was a short word, however, and Darrell put every thought out of his head and tried listening closely. He suddenly felt chills moving up his body. It was like a cold breeze blew upon him, like a draft from a cracked window or screen. Daryl's imagination started to run wild. He thought of a ghostly hand coming down on his shoulder. This sent even more chills soaring through his body, and Daryl had the strong urge to run back to his sleeping bag. He forced himself to concentrate. Where's my Fern? Where's my Fern? Daryl replayed it several more times. The more he played, the more it was starting to come into focus. Where's my Fern? Holy shit! Andy! Daryl raced toward his snoring partner. He knelt down and shook him vigorously. Andy shut up, his face in a daze, hollering what the problem was. Where's my Fern? Where's my Fern? I don't know where your Fern is, Andy said. A ghost probably took it. Can we go back to sleep now? No, we took it from the ghost. What are you talking about? He had one eye closed and the other barely open. That's what the noise was saying on the tape. Remember when we threw away that plant? That's what the noise was saying on the tape. Remember when we threw away that plant? Well, it belonged to a ghost. Before Andy could say anything else, they thought they heard the sound of shuffling feet coming from down the east hallway. Daryl felt his heart drop to his stomach and his hair stood on end. There was a mixture of excitement and pure terror. Half of him wanted to just call it quits, but the other half was saying this may be his golden opportunity. He swallowed hard and stood up, his legs feeling like rubber. Get the night vision recorder, Daryl instructed. Andy was reluctant but obeyed. He dug into the duffel bag and disclosed the gadget. The second he turned it on, the shuffling was heard again. Daryl's flashlight began to shake. He was becoming nauseous as they advanced toward the east hallway where the noise was heard. He stopped for a second, feeling the cold breeze go through him again. Do you feel that draft? Andy asked. Daryl nodded. Yep. That usually means there's a ghost nearby. We can only hope, Daryl said. Suddenly they saw a black figure shoot across the hallway. It made them jump and almost drop what they were carrying. Daryl scolded himself for being so terrified. If he was going to be a famous ghost hunter, he needed to calm down. Oh my God, he heard Andy say. Daryl shone the light over the hallway. He gasped in horror as the light revealed a trail of dry blood leading to the other end. It was fresh, for it shimmered in the light. Where did that come from? Andy asked. Before Daryl could answer, the light came to the end of the hall and it landed on a figure that appeared to be crouching in the corner. The light only landed for a second because it took that long to realize who the figure was. It was the lady from the photo. He recognized the slanted blue eyes and pressed lips. The eyes had burned into the way they had in the photo. What was the most disturbing were the hands. The bandages had been ripped off and they were dripping with shiny red blood. Their high-pitched screams echoed throughout the building. It continued as they tore out of the nursing home. They ran to the other side of the street, panting heavily. Daryl's heart was beating so fast that he thought it might burst. His body was shaking so bad he had trouble standing. Are we going back in? Andy asked breathlessly. Our equipment is still in there. I don't know, Daryl replied. I don't know if... His sentence was cut short by another figure he saw across the street. He recognized the faded overalls and the toothless, gummy smile. Daryl's grandfather was rocking in the pale yellow rocking chair, making it go squeak, squeak. He lifted his bony hand, shook it for a wave, and then leaned over and spit a wad of chewing tobacco in his tin can. The Night at Cedar Oaks was written by Matthew Meyer and originally published in the magazine The Haunted Life.